We're continuing our coverage of the results of yesterday's races here in your local election headquarters. Republicans did very well in the state of Ohio, winning the top of ballot races for governor and U.S. Senate. But the red wave that was anticipated throughout the rest of the nation, frankly, just did not happen. And joining us to understand the results of these races and what they mean, Dr. Lee Hanna, Associate Professor of Political Science at Wright State University. Dr. Hanna, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the House at this point looks like it will be a Republican majority. Still cannot make that official assessment yet. We don't know by how much. And we might not know anything about the Senate until December after yet another Georgia runoff. And it's quite possible that congressional power will be split between the two chambers. Considering that midterms historically do not go well for a first-term president, why then do you think the president and Democrats were able to avoid the major power change that many had predicted?
Yes, John. You know, I think what this really taught me is, despite how we normally think that these elections all come down to the economy and what people think about the president, candidates still matter. And I think in many cases, had the Republicans run a stronger candidate in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Arizona, then we would be talking about more of a red wave or at least a Republican Senate. And so we often kind of downplay that and say it's all about partisanship and kind of the broader environment. But there were, you know, a handful of candidates that were either pretty strong for the Democrats, they picked pretty well, or pretty weak for the Republicans, and that put them behind the eight ball in this election.
Yeah, Donald Trump is expected to announce another run for the presidency next Tuesday, yet his impact on the Republican Party is being questioned following last night's results. And interestingly, Dr. Hanna, of all the people J.D. Vance thanked during his victory speech last night, and there were a lot of them, he did not mention Donald Trump's name once. What impact do you think that he will have on the GOP as the parties start to gear up for the 2024 election?
Yes, you know, I think it was a pretty bad night for the president, and that's even just by watching, you know, some of the commentary from conservatives who are very supportive of him and conservative lawmakers like Ron DeSantis and others. It's worth noting that there have been many times where, you know, the media has kind of buried Donald Trump. You can go back to his, you know, remarks about John McCain in 2015, and he seems to be pretty resilient. But certainly, he did pick a handful of these candidates and prop them up in a way that, you know, set up the GOP for a tougher race than they anticipated. And, you know, I don't know what will happen. I think the other challenge is Kevin McCarthy will be the House leader more than likely, but he's going to have very slim margins and a lot of division amongst the GOP about how they move forward, whether they're a party that leans into, you know, Donald Trump, or they're a party that is looking for maybe a different message or a different standard bearer like a Ron DeSantis.
Dr. Lee Hanna, Associate Professor of Political Science at Wright State University. Still a lot to talk about from the election last night. Great talking to you, Dr. Hanna. Thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks, John.